Be aware that you're being monitored. Go for it.
All right. Okay. So to start off, we're going to make a REST JPA Hibernate program. What is this? A microservice that can handle accessing the SQL database while also accepting REST API commands from other services. So if we can all go to starts.spring.io, we're going to make a new project. Let me know when you're all there so we can go on to the dependencies.
I'm there.
All right. Some of the dependencies, we only need 3 things. We're going to look into Spring Web, which will allow the REST API. Next, we're going to go into the JPA, which allows us to connect through Hibernate to the SQL databases and map them into Java objects. And lastly, we need the Postgres SQL driver. If you're going to use another database, you can go ahead and do so. But if you have SQL already set up with Postgres, you can just use this one. Make sure the artifact name is as you want it to be. You can generate it, and it will provide you a zip that you can unzip anywhere and load into IntelliJ. So right now I'm going to open up IntelliJ IDEA and click Open or Import. Navigate to where I keep my projects. And as you can see, the one that we've unzipped here is highlighted in blue, or whichever color it is for your theme, which signifies that this is compatible with the IDE. And if we open that up, we can see that it's already importing the necessary dependencies. And soon to the left, we will have the source code. Is everybody good with that so far?
Just a minute, my
I'm still
computer.
opening it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's give everybody a minute now for anyone who
I don't have SQL set up.
That's fine. You won't be able to do you might not be able to do the actual push request then. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through a SQL configuration.
Yeah,
but
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah, like I said, I'm recording it. What I can say for anyone who has gotten to this point while we wait for the others, feel free to go over to General and like the LinkedIn post that was just given. Share some love. Yeah, tonight's event. Hopefully some of you guys can join it. It's going to be pretty fascinating stuff again. Always is. People always talk about really interesting things. So. All right. Does anyone need any more time? I'm going to take that as a no. So yeah, heads up, Barniel. In the future, the better question is to ask if anyone needs more time instead of is everyone ready? Because then you're trying to get everyone to say yes, and you're more likely to get the person that needs more time to say yes than the people who are done to say yes.
Good to know.
Yeah, just take that from someone who's been teaching for a while now. That's the easiest. I learned very hard. I learned very quickly that the better question is to ask those who need extra time to admit than to try to get everybody to say they're good. Because some people just don't want to say I'm good.
All right.
Cool.
So,
go for it.
So before we actually set up anything, I mean, before we start coding, we need to actually configure the properties for this project. So within main resources, you're going to find application properties. And this, we're going to tell JPA where and how we want to connect to our database. I have a little bit of code here, which I will share with everybody. And now to send that to the chat, if that opens up. Okay, so basically what this does, it connects to the URL where your Postgres server should be running. For example, this one is 5433 to run, is it Postgres 13? Whichever one you need to use, you can set it there. Beyond that, we have the username and password. This is self-explanatory. This will allow you to connect to the database. Database in question should be defined here as well. Very important. Lastly, these two lines, this one just sets the driver to be using Postgres, set that as necessary. And this line down here will set up JPA to automatically generate the schema for your tables. It can do this later on, but having this here makes sure that as soon as you run the program, that table is already ready for you to use. Right. I'll give everybody some time to set that up.
Do you mind making that? I was gonna say make that full screen, and I don't. Never mind. I don't actually. Yeah, you have to go to like the editor to make it bigger text.
And that's not it.
No, I think I go to like the. Oh, hello. What? How did you? What's that mode?
Presentation mode.
Oh, cool. Well done. That works.
I'm actually going to set this up right now while we wait.
As Scott's little comic strip showed, like again, you don't have to know every piece of a software to use it.
Arniel, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
What are you going to be like storing the data in? So it's local host, but like how did you set that up?
Well, I installed Postgres on my own computer, basically.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's another service that you can do that very easily.
Okay.
With
Yeah,
Windows, it's pretty easy to install SQL, especially Postgres. It's actually pretty easy to install it on a Windows system. Mac, it's a little trickier, but there are guides online to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that a username and password you had set up in your SQL thing, or did you just make those up now?
Yes, these are parameters that I've set up for my SQL already.
Okay.
When you did the installation, it has you set that up. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
All right, where is everybody on this? Anybody need more time?
There's the question. And there's your answer.
All right, I guess we'll continue now. That, I think I broke it.
Might not want to be in presentation mode. It might. Oh, that's what you needed.
Yeah. Okay, so now we can go under Java and start making our code. Actually, can I still set this to presentation mode? Oh, that works. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's nice. I might have to start using that in my classes now.
Okay, to keep everything organized, we're actually going to make a few packages under our Hibernate project. And these will be named the following: model, service, repository, and controller.
What I want people to notice is that on those packages, note how 3 of those actually have are recognized names. Controller now has the gear icon, model has what looks almost like a database icon, and service has, I don't know why, but a Lambda icon. Usually because I think they do Lambda methods in there, but is it Lambda? Is that Lambda? I think that's Lambda.
Something to do with expressions.
Yeah, I don't remember that symbol. I'm not great with my Roman letters. Those are Greek letters. Never mind. I'm gonna stop it on my head. But my main focus was just note how those terms were recognized by the EDE. EDE. All right, Neil, it's all yours.
All right. Okay.
Do other people have that as well? Mine just look like regular packages.
No, mine is regular.
Really?
Mine
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
Why is
I mean,
it different?
I probably installed a theme on this.
Oh God. Probably. Never mind then. Continue on.
All right. Okay. So the first thing we're going to go into is the model, actually. And I would like some help from the class. Who has any ideas for what we want to be storing in this database?
Can we just do username or email and password? Like it's an auth server?
Yeah, we could make a user server. So we're going to make a standard class and append attributes to it. The primary attribute we want to use is the entity. And what this allows JPA or Hibernate to do is link it to the database in question. Alongside that, we could also be more specific and tell what table we want to use for this entity. This is not necessary, but if you want to use a different name than the one provided here, then you can go ahead and do so. For example, table. And name will be equal to whichever you want the table's name to be. In this case, we're going to keep it the same as user.
I will say
Now
common practice can be to name the table plural with the model being singular, but it's fine to do it this way if you want to keep it simple.
In that case, I'll put the
Saying it's a common practice. It's not a required practice. It's fairly common because the table is storing multiple users. So that's the usual reason for it. But your call.
All right. Okay, so there's 2 ways that we can define columns for this now. We could either provide get and set methods or expose our fields publicly. For this, for simplicity reasons, and the fact that this is going to be maintained within our program and not be exposed to anything else, we're going to make it public. And the 4 columns that we could provide, for example, are the ID, the user's name, email, and should we provide a password too? Or is that not necessary for this?
Your call. It's your call on that. How many fields you want to deal with for the process.
We'll just put favorite color.
Works for me.
Okay. So here we go. As you can see, these are all public. And now what I'm going to do is link them into the database by using columns. And for the ID, okay, my bad. For the ID, we're going to actually use the ID attribute, or that's what they're called, right? Attributes,
Fields.
fields, annotations.
Annotations. Yeah, that was.
The at, sorry. Those are
Okay.
talking about the item ID, name, and email. No, yeah, annotations are because the at symbol, annotations, at.
And then for everything else, we're just going to put column on it. And for this, to be more specific, we could also set the specific name for these columns. As you can see, these do not need to be the same as the field's name itself. It will map to the database.
And just another heads up, this is also known as verbose programming, where you're being very, very descriptive, putting in all the optional items. As Arniel said, adding those names aren't really necessary. Even I think adding the @ column isn't required. It's a default system, but these can be really nice because it's very verbose, it's very descriptive. It can be really nice for the next developer that comes in to see what your code's doing. So something to consider.
And one last thing we'll put on this entity is we're going to make the ID automatically generated. Just like that, everything should be done.
Generated how?
This will, okay, I think this will use the standard in which it will increment the ID with every time we add one to the database.
Is there a way you can also just set it to be like a random, like how Mongo does like the huge long ones? Like, can you do it that way too, or is it just?
Well, we could set the strategy here. I'm not quite familiar with them, to be honest, but if you do find a way to make it randomized and unique, please do let us know.
Yeah, what I would recommend is looking into something called UUID.
Yeah.
UUID is a strategy that involves, unique identifiers.
Anybody need more time?
I got to double check, but I think it actually stands for universally unique identifiers, identification or ID.
Makes sense.
I think. I haven't looked at it in a while, so I could be off.
Okay. Anybody need more time with us? I don't know if that's a yes or no. I'm just going to keep going.
That's a yes. That's a you're good. Keep going.
All right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is actually make the repository. And this is what's going to hold our users with the link to the database. So we can name this user repository and make this an interface for JPA or Spring Boot to define for us. And with that, we're going to be extending JPA's repository. And as you can see here, it takes two generic values, the class and the ID. As you could see for the user, we actually used a long for the ID. So we're going to use the object variant of this value. So the class is user and the ID is long. We don't need to put anything in here specifically just yet, but if we wanted to, this is where we would define methods to acquire specific users or lists of users by the attributes that they hold. The values within them, that is. We should probably look into that further, but that is not in the scope of this lesson now. Let me know if anybody needs more time with this.
I think we're good.
Okay. Last part of this, we're going to make the service that consumes the user repository. We're going to append the service attribute, which will allow this to be generated by JPA identically to a bean, which also means that we can use the auto-wired attribute here. So we're going to auto-wire the user repository service that we made before. The user repository interface, my bad. And now we can define methods to specifically access this here. So for example, we can provide a find all, which will return a list of users. And here's something that I actually wanted to cover with the class. If you try to return all of the elements within a database, you will encounter problems if that database is noticeably large. For example, thousands to millions of items will actually load it all into memory and then send it all at once to the user. This is not very efficient, nor is it very safe for the server itself.
Before you give them an answer, I'm curious, anyone have an idea how you might solve that? Yeah, if you try to pull
I mean,
if you have
I guess you could paginate it.
Is that the idea you're going to go for, Erniel?
Yeah, let's go with that. Okay.
I was also thinking like sometime maybe you could calculate like a memory limit. Although you probably wouldn't want to even get close to that.
True, and that's kind of what the pagination is going to do. It's going to allow us to grab a certain number at a time.
Yeah.
So that way we're only grabbing a certain number. We don't grab too many at a time.
So let's define this as void temporarily so that we know what type we're going to use once we're done. And we're going to give it the same name, except this time we're going to return database find all by pageable. So as we can see here, page request, we can use page request to actually generate a pageable, which will be consumed by this method here. Let me move this zoom. This provides a static method called of, which allows us to generate this page request by these parameters here. So we're going to use page and size. And we can very conveniently pass them as parameters to this method here. And now lastly, we can see that this is going to return, goodness, zoom. Hold on.
Yeah, that thing likes to get in the way.
Yeah. So this is going to return a page of the user type. So we can replace void here with page of generic user. Import page. This is not screaming at us anymore. And that is all for this. And now one last thing, we could implement one or two more methods to actually populate the database, along with one to remove items by the ID. We're going to, actually Cliff, I wanted to ask you, is it important if we differentiate between create and update?
In this case, I'm not too worried about differentiating them. It can be a benefit to the time restrictions by combining the two. So I'm okay with that for this project, by not worrying too much about differentiating them.
All right, because the way that this works is that if an ID matches another one in the database, it will actually override that one. In this case, updating it. So we don't need the actual reference to the object in question, we just need the ID. So I'm going to make a method called save, where we're going to pass a user. And with this, we're going to return the database, save user. And why we're returning it is because if this is a new element, then it's going to return a copy of user, which holds the unique ID to access it. Upon that, we should also provide a way to get specific IDs. And lastly, to remove by the ID. All right, where is everybody with this? Do we need more time?
Sit here for a couple seconds. Yeah, sit here for a couple seconds. We'll read it a bit, catch up.
What's the other wire doing up top?
The other what?
The other wired? What's that annotation doing?
So when we create the service by Spring Boot, AutoWired is going to be called and provide a unique implementation to the user repository interface that we made before. Basically, Spring Boot is providing us the database.
It has an automatic like default configuration that it's doing. It's automatically stitching together these items.
That's a better way to word it.
I gotcha.
So what the annotation is doing is making sure that this that the database here will be assigned from the database that was defined elsewhere in the program, rather than having to be set up in a constructor or something. That's
Correct.
what you're saying.
There you go. Almost. That was good. Anybody else need time? Or any other questions on this? Anything interesting or looks out of place? I'm going to take that as a no. Keep going.
All right. Lastly, we're going to make the controller. And I'm just going to name, excuse me. I'm going to name this controller for simplicity's sake, but you could put this as any name that you desire.
I would usually call it user controller, but this is fine.
In that case, let's actually go ahead and do that.
Don't change that unless you do the refactor version of it. Oh wait, it did
Already
it
done.
What?
He's got that shortcut unlocked.
Dang it.
Yep.
Look at him go. Yeah, go for it. All right, keep going.
All right. Okay.
What is
So-
the shortcut? Actually, I don't use it.
F6.
I set it to Control RR, so
Oh, well, that's good.
What's the normal one again, Michael?
F6.
F6.
F6. Okay.
I never use it because it's so annoying to use.
That's why Arniel most likely changed it.
Yeah, I need to read it. All right, sorry.
all right. So we're going to add an attribute to this REST controller. And what this does here is it allows us to receive requests while also giving us a way to send back JSON, basically, if we were to pass an object as a response. Another thing we can do is add a request mapping so that we can make this a specific controller to, let's say, the API. This is not necessary. This is simply for my own sake to keep things organized. You do not need to have this line.
This is similar to what we did in our Express APIs. We had all of our APIs go to the API route. If you remember how that worked.
Like a base URL.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Good
So let's
change. Yep.
define a few methods. Firstly, we want to get a page from this database. So we're going to have a new GET request. This is in no way insecure. And here we can actually pass parameters to this request. For example, we can have it so that it requires a page and a size for the page. Params are used inside of the URL behind the question marks, if you're curious. So we're going to make this page. Size. And the reason why I make these integers instead of ints is because we could actually define these as not required. So we could access this URL without having to define the page or size and add logic here to determine whether we want to return everything or a specific page. In this case, we want to make sure that we're only getting a page. So if integer is not defined, we're going to set that to the default. So we're going to set these as not required. Make a new int for page. And if page is empty, we're not empty, Then we're going to use this or that. And this is just me overcomplicating it, but you can, if you would like to, you can follow along or omit this. We're going to make a constant for the max size, default size, my bad, and set that to 30. Now with that out of the way, we can actually return the request. Before we do that, okay, I'm all over the place, I'm sorry. So in order to use
It
the
gets tricky.
service,
Don't worry.
okay,
Stay calm.
in order to use the service, we have to auto-wire it to this REST controller. So up here, we're going to call auto-wired, provide the user service, and set that to a new field. This will automatically be set whenever we run the program, so we don't need to worry about defining this manually. Now with this, we can find all by the page and size that we have defined previously, or by the fixed ones here if you set this to required as true. And before we test this, we need a way to actually populate the database. So let's make a new post mapping. We could set it to users or whichever one you want. In this case, I'm going to set it to singular user. Public object, post user. And with this, we're going to request the body of a new user object. Now, this could be a security flaw if you have any columns that you don't want to be populated by the user sending it. In this case, we could make a new model which only has the ones that we want to receive, or strip it within here. For the sake of this, I'm going to keep it simple and say we don't have anything we need to hide from people. So with this, we're going to call the service and save the user that we've been passed. And that is our post mapping. I can now save and run this. If we go to the REST JPA application here and click this arrow to the left if it appears. It's not going to appear, is it?
Might not appear in presentation mode, but it's right there on the
All right.
bottom. Yeah.
So we can run it through that. Can I exit full screen? Oh, that's convenient. So now the service is running. We can go to Postman here and start sending requests.
To the user controller for one moment.
The user
I
controller?
need to finish
Yeah.
that too. You just returned the objects here. Is that actually the user object?
I should explain that actually. So I'm returning objects here because if by any point I want to return something different within this request, this will automatically map it to the appropriate JSON for it. For example, this will return a page, but instead, if something were to go wrong, I could return a response element, which has that specific error. We could define this as a higher type, which will confine it to only this or that. But for convenience sake, I keep everything as object.
This was that mention of how do we send JSON back, and this is kind of what we're looking for. Yeah, as long as you send any object at all back in a REST
Nice.
the request this thing, it will actually go ahead and do that for you. It's actually pretty impressive.
So it could be a user object. It could be a string object. It could be
It's going to automatically JSONify whatever send
object you
back?
send. Yes, whatever object you send. So it has to be a key value paired item, an object. Yeah. And like he was mentioning before, in this case, like before, let's say you wanted to, if we did add passwords to this user table, if you wanted to send back users without the password being going with it, you would create another model that does not have a repository or a service attached to it. It's just a model, like a response model. This is a model that takes a portion of the user model and sends that down as a response, because you need to have an object to send. So that's what Arniel was mentioning about. Well, what if we had secured data that we didn't want to send down to a user? We would have a user response model, as I would call it. So I would call it a user response. That tells me this is the item that we send back in the response to the user, to the request. That way it's safe. So that's how I would do it. In case anyone needs to understand that a little more. Cool.
Would that have like the actual user's data in it, or would that just be like a message?
What do you mean?
Like the user response model. That would just contain a portion of the user model?
Right. You would just have the keys that you're okay with sending to the user, to the requester. Those would be the only keys in there. So Arniel, just click on the user model for a second. For example, let's say we wanted to not send email down. We just wanted to send name and favorite color. In our next user, in the second user model, we would have just, we can also do that too. Yeah, we could have the other variation of the user that just gives us name and favorite color.
Just like that. That's one way to implement the stripping down.
But that doesn't strip anything. It just stripped the ID out. I wanted to get rid of the email.
Oh, yes. There we go.
So that's the way that's another way you could do it too. Yeah, that actually works as well. Because you would just leave email null. So.
Wait a minute, but you're making a new user with nothing in it and then returning it. So you're not returning anything specific. I mean, wasn't...
But he's calling the method inside of the user class. So these fields would already be filled in. And so he's just creating a stripped down version of the user to send to the front end, because you don't want to send the password or the email.
Okay, so this is for when you make a new user, but you don't want to send all the info to the front end.
Right. Okay. So any secured data that you want. So even on profiles, there's usually data that you don't want to share the front end. You're using to track things. Like think about all that Facebook stores on you that they don't send down when you ask for things. So that's kind of the idea here. You're stripping down information. So this is one way of doing it, where you do it like this, where you just rebuild the object. And another thing is you could actually create a second model that you can then fill in with the user information. So there's two ways of doing it. But yeah, I like that one too. That one's kind of nice, and you only get one model. So cool.
Last thing, I'm actually going to return the stripped version of this here. I know we're not going to do that for the pages, but this is just an example. All right, are we good with this?
Can you go back to the user model for just 1 second?
Wait, but strip doesn't take a user. How?
It takes the instance that it's being called on.
Oh, we had switched from the database to the user class.
Yes.
Okay, now it makes sense.
Yep. I'm sorry, I think you were looking away when I had him switch over. My bad.
Okay, what was Marguerite's question?
I just wanted to look at this for 1 more second. I'm all set. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so are we ready to go to Postman now?
I think we're good.
Do we run that? Okay. So this is located on localhost 8080 for me. Zoom is in the way again. So let's try poking that. We get a response. So we are poking the server at least. We can take a quick look to what the REST API permits us to do. We have users and user here under the API. What is it? The API mapping. So these are our endpoints. Let's try to post a user now. So we have our name.
Not JavaScript, JSON.
Ah, dang. I didn't even
gotcha.
know we can send JavaScript.
Yeah, I gotcha. I gotcha.
It's just an example. We can try posting it to the server. And there we go. We have a response. Email is null. So email is null and ID is 0 because we're actually stripping it. But in an actual case, we might want to define a new model which doesn't have these in the first place.
So, yeah.
That was what I was mentioning. Yeah, creating a secondary model that contains just the name and favorite color. But we don't worry about that yet. Go ahead and finish what you're doing. Do the get.
Yes, that's
Post
what
the
I would
second person.
recommend for any project. That's actually what I was doing before we started teaching this now.
Yeah, go ahead and do the add another user, and then we can do the get all.
Okay, does anybody have recommendations?
Who's
Anybody at
joining?
all?
Donatello.
Wait, what?
What's that, Gabe?
I said Donatello.
Adding Donatello, apparently. Oh, Michael.
I don't know who Donatello is. What's his favorite color?
Purple, obviously.
That or pizza, but
All right. Okay, so we can post that. ID is still 0, email still null. And you know what? Let's try to get a page. So get, oh, right. I forgot about this.
get the page object.
Yeah,
We got the page object, but we didn't actually map it to anything.
People wanted to see this because I want people to see that error so they know what to do next. So there you go. You see that? That's normal. But now what do we do? How do we fix it?
Okay, so let's actually fix that right now. To get user page, we're going to get a pageable. We're going to get a page. Okay, so here, what I would do is create a new hash map to easily create an object that will return keys and values. I've actually made a utility for that before, but in this case, we're just going to create a new map with string and object as the generics. And in this, we're going to put content. It's going to be get page, get content. And along that, we're also going to put the page size and page count. So we're going to put total pages. And like that. And this is all we really need to return, just the total pages, total items. But along that, we could also put the past size and past page. I'll do that here. And now when we call this again, I'm going to press Control-Shift F5 to rerun the server. We're only going to get these 5 things. Going to give you all a bit more time to set that up.
Just so you guys know, those methods are part of the page. Is page an object or an interface?
Page is an interface.
Thought so. So if anyone remembers, I don't remember I forgot the shortcut, but Hayden showed how he was able to click on the interface and actually load up the interfaces file. You could look at some of the other methods that you have access to if you wanted to. So something to think about.
I have that linked to F12, but I'm not going to click that now so people could put this down.
No worries. I just want to remind people that that was a thing that Hayden showed off. So feel free to do that again. Go ahead and bring it up.
Does anybody need more time?
I hear crickets. That sounds good.
All right, let's go back to Postman. Remove the body for this. When we're going to send it. There we go. We have nothing. Well, that's odd.
That is strange.
Go back. So size is
You
30
rebooted
pages
this. No,
long.
wait. No, you're using a database. I almost said you rebooted the server, but if you saved to the database, it should be there.
It says that we do have 2 items in it.
No, you do.
Content was empty before you created them hash maps too, so.
Yeah. Maybe the default page is supposed to be 0. Let's check. Wow, look at that.
Yep, page 0, right?
I
Gotta
keep
go
getting
right
confused with these. All right, I'm going to set the default to 0. But we don't need to restart it yet because we could already pass the parameters here. So for example, we could also set this size to only 1. And now we have 2 pages to iterate through. As you can see, we have Michael. And on page 1, we have Donatello.
And just so you know, Arniel, Ninja Turtles.
Oh.
All right.
That makes a little bit more sense, yeah.
There you go. Yep. Any questions or anything we need to look at again?
Could you go back to the user controller for just a second?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Whoops.
Any specific method you want to look at?
Right there is perfect. I didn't catch when we switched the things we were passing into the request param, so just
Okay. Curious, Arniel, do you normally not have line numbers showing, or is that part of presentation mode, you think?
That's part of presentation mode.
Ah, dang it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing.
great. All set.
Okay,
Anybody else? Any
We're-
questions?
where's everybody on this?
I couldn't get my Postman to get anything through.
Was it the post or the get that didn't work?
Oh, I see. It's oh, it refused a connection to the local host from Hibernate.
Oh, fine.
Are you using HTTPS?
No, I mean when I just ran the program, it didn't work. That's why Postman's not working. Could you go back to the applications?
This here?
No, not that one. in the resources. The properties. So is that 5433 just the default that it usually uses?
That is the port for the 13 Postgres server.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
you want
I
to know
use-
what your SQL Service port number is.
Yeah. I'm using PostgreSQL 15.
Wait, there's a 15.
No, 15, I said. That's what I'm using.
Yeah.
You could try running the SQL command from the terminal to see if you can connect to the shell or the REPL, whatever they use, to see if the server is actively running right now.
Isn't 3306 default for SQL usually?
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah, Mike, are you using Postgres or SQL? Because you're using SQL, then you're probably gonna have a different port number because Arneil's using Postgres.
Yeah, I'm using Postgres.
Okay, good. I was just checking.
Thought he said he was using.
Yeah, I don't know how to get to a command line for that though. Oh.
Then what's the tool for Postgres? Isn't it like Postgres?
PSQL.
Yeah, it's like Postgres admin or something, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there's admin too. It took a while to get working on my Windows computer though.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of something we could use to make sure that his Postgres is actually up and running. That would be my current. That's my current assumption of why it's saying denied. The only other reason you would get a connection denied is if the username and password is wrong. So either the URL is wrong or the username and password is wrong. Usually, if the username and password is wrong, you would just get like an authentication error. I don't know if you get a connection refused. I think.
Okay, I never actually figured out how to use PostgreSQL.
So it may
That's
not be
fine.
running then.
Yeah.
I might try to see if I can do a tutorial on how to install Postgres on Mac, but I don't know, Mike, what do you have? Mac or Windows?
Windows.
Yeah, shoot. Maybe on what I would say over the weekend, people make sure you can get your SQL running. If not, we can try to see if we can do some guides on Monday. It's already 1:30. Any other questions on this?
I just wanted to say I think this lesson was really well organized and presented.
Yes,
Why, thank you.
I agree.
Yep.
Very well done. Good walkthrough. You were able to follow along. You covered the basics. People have what they need to start, as we said, playing with it and breaking things. So now we can start blowing stuff up. So everyone's challenge of the weekend, of course, is to practice with this a bit. Other than that, of course, your gateway is your priority item. But I always say after a lesson, after a little bit after it, take an hour, play around with what you just learned, try to build something on your own. So build like a profile model or something like that, and try to do that, or build like a blog model, and save blogs. I don't know. Main thing is to practice what you learned today to make sure that it sticks. I would also work with each other to help each other make sure everyone has SQL installed, Postgres installed. So check with everyone, make sure everyone has it running and has it working. That's my challenge.
Is there a reason we prefer Postgres?
Postgres is a little more features behind it. It has some stronger scripting things, so it's getting a lot more popularity in the companies and businesses. So, and if you know Postgres, SQL just has less. It's not as powerful. So all the syntax you learn in Postgres is completely usable, or at least most of it's usable in SQL. You just have to simplify it a bit. Be less fancy. That's all. So. I would recommend learning Postgres because that's most likely what you're going to end up using in a company. Postgres, I think, is also free, whereas my SQL is Microsoft. So. That's gonna be everyone's challenge for the weekend. Help each other get your SQL up. I would love to help you, Mike, but I am on Mac. I haven't done SQL on Windows in a while. If anyone here wants to help Mike, please do. Help him get his SQL up and running. I'm very confident that's what the problem is. Based on that error message you're getting, your SQL server isn't running at the moment. Other than that, any questions on the project?
I have a quick question.
Go for it.
Have you used Docker with Postgres before?
Not I.
That is the usual recommended way of doing it on Mac. Yes, you would install it on a Docker instance and have it running. I did it once a while ago. Mostly I tend to use cloud-based systems, so I haven't done it recently. I had to recheck how to do it, but yeah, I did it once.
I'm going through that right now. I thought it would be cool just to play around with Docker.
Yep.
And so with my Docker application running, could I make requests from outside of my local connection?
Yeah,
So-
well, again, your Docker instance will act as part of the local host, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
So your system won't see it as any different.
But if I port forward it, would I be able to then access it outside of my local host?
I believe so, because again, the computer is the one that's actually responding and then pinging to that item. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Because I was thinking of, for the user system anyways, to do that, like just have it run on Docker instead of, I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
no, no. Using Docker containerizing is definitely another bell and whistle you can add to your project to make it sound more powerful, especially because then it can make it very easily demoable by the company, because then they can just download the Docker instance, spin it up, and use it.
Yeah.
So definitely be good. Things to look into. Yeah. So everyone's challenged, like I said, over the weekend. Finish up your gateway. Get that done as soon as you can, and then practice more of this. Make sure this stuff becomes familiar to you, because in the authentication server, you're going to be using this stuff. You now have everything you need for the authentication server. So that's your next challenge to start moving towards on. All right. Again, postings on Slack, ask for help, get assistance. I'll be here. Your classmates are here. We're going to get you guys going this month. All right. I will see everyone on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks, Arneil.
Thank you,
All right.
Arneil.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Very good lesson.
Can you leave now?
What up? Cliff, you're muted.
Cliff, you're muted.
Muted, dude.
Cliff.
There's a damn it for you. I always like to see who stays on last. See
Yeah.
if anyone does. And it's always interesting to see who it is. It's usually the same thing.
It's always the same people.
Yeah. But this one actually works because, yeah, I can definitely say, get a Neil. Well done. Very well organized. And you definitely went through the whole walkthrough process. So it feels like the few lessons, even though you weren't in cohort, 11 that long, the process of going through walkthroughs seemed to rub off on you. So well done on that. Everyone seemed to be able to follow along, so it's good. That's the key item here, is making sure people are able to do it with you. So.
No, yeah.